Lasagna alla bolognese is the ultimate in Italian comfort food. Here's my take on what could be considered the holy grail of lasagna. Okay, there's a few things to do before building and baking the lasagna, and it all starts with the ragu alla bolognese. Place a large sauce pot over medium-high heat and add a few tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Once it's hot, add 227 grams of chopped pancetta. Cook it down until all that fat is rendered out and the little pieces of meat are a rich mahogany color. Now add 680 grams of ground pork to the pot and give it a good stir so it's all mixed up with that pancetta. Then let it cook. The goal here is to render out all that fat and let the moisture evaporate so the meat can brown nicely. We're also looking for a crust to develop on the bottom of the pan, and that's called the fond. It's one of the keys to irresistible flavor. Add 680 grams of ground beef. Now chuck is my preference here since it has about 20% fat and packs some great flavor, but use what you can find. It's all good. Stir the raw meat into the pork and pancetta just like you did before, then repeat the process of letting that fat render and the moisture evaporate. Once you begin to hear that meat sizzle, well, it's a great indication that your ragu is progressing nicely. Time to transition from meat onto other ingredients. That means it's time for the holy trinity of vegetables in Italian cookery: finely chopped onion, carrots, and celery, also known as the building blocks for sofrito. And the ragu wouldn't be complete without some freshly minced garlic, so add about 28 grams to the pot as well. Reduce the heat to medium-low, give the pot a stir, and let the veggies sweat and soften for about 10 minutes or so. While that's happening, finally chop a few teaspoons each of fresh rosemary, sage, and some fresh thyme, then add the fresh herbs into the sauce pot. Stir, then stop to take in all the wonderful things that are going on in this pot right now. I mean, the smell is just amazing, isn't it? Time to deglaze the pan with some wine. Now, red or white or red, that's the million-dollar question, right? Either's fine, but I lean toward the brighter, more subtle flavor of white wine for this ragu. Now, the inclusion of liquid should help pull the fond off the bottom of the pot. Just take a peek and make sure it's actually happening before you add the 56 grams of tomato paste. Work it into the other ingredients, then let the ragu cook for a few minutes so the paste has a chance to melt into all that delicious meat and veggie. Now there's just 2 ingredients left before this sauce simmers away for half the day. Add 794 grams of tomato puree and 680 grams of a brown stock. I happen to have brown chicken stock on hand, but beef or brown veal stock fit the bill as well. Now once again, give the sauce a generous stir, bring it up to a gentle simmer, and let the ragu slowly bubble away for about 4 hours. Just make sure you check on it once in a while. Today I decided to break out my food processor. This way I can skip blanching and pureeing my greens and instead add them directly to the flour. The dough takes a good beating too, which jumpstarts gluten formation. Okay, for the pasta, start by adding 225 grams each of 00 and fine semolina flour. This blend gives you a soft yet sturdy dough with just a little bit of texture that can stand up to that hearty bolognese. Next, drop in 60 grams of fresh spinach. You could easily sub out a different green here, but traditional lasagna alla bolognese, well, it calls for spinach. Okay, pulse the machine on and off until the greens are completely broken down and incorporated into the flour. Then add 2 whole eggs and 5 large egg yolks. That's about 120 grams and 90 grams respectively. Season the mixture with about a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. No need to be exact, a fat pinch will do here. Follow that up with a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil. Then pulse the food processor to bring all the ingredients together. At first, it'll look shaggy, then the dough will transform into this green, tacky, and slightly crumbly mass. Turn it out onto your counter, press the dough together, and knead it for a minute or 2 until it's one smooth hunk of pasta dough. Once you have it nice and compact, place the dough under a bowl or wrap it in some plastic film. Realistically, the dough only needs about 30 minutes or so to rest before you can work with it, so time things accordingly, okay? Cut off about 1/3 of the dough, then place the rest back under the bowl or wrap it in film again. This will keep it from forming a skin while you work with it a little bit at a time. Flatten the dough out using your fingers, then continue with a rolling pin if you have one. Essentially, you just want the dough thin enough so it doesn't tear on its maiden voyage through the pasta machine. Now, dust the pasta with a little flour, adjust the pasta rollers to their widest setting, then pass the dough through the machine, being careful not to let your fingers follow along. Ouch. The pasta sheet will come out the other end a bit longer, so fold it over onto itself a few times and use a rolling pin or your fingers to thin it out. Remember, if the sheet's too thick, the machine might tear it when you try to pass it through. Now, rotate the dough 90 degrees and pass it through the widest setting again. Continue the process of passing, folding, and rotating a few more times. This is called laminating the dough, and it really improves the texture of your final pasta. Now, work your dough through the thinner settings of the machine, one number at a time. Eventually, the pasta should be as wide as the rollers are. At least, that's the goal anyway. On most machines, the pasta is thin enough once you hit setting 6 or 7. For lasagna, I'm going to stop on 6 because I want that dough to be on the thicker side of things. If I was making a stuffed pasta, I'd go a hair thinner and stop on setting number 7. At this point, the pasta sheet should be significantly longer, so carefully lay it out on the counter and flour each side. This step helps to keep the pasta from sticking together when you cut it and stack it up. Keep in mind that pasta expands when it cooks, so cut each length a little shorter than the width of your baking dish. That way, you don't have to do as much pasta trimming when building your lasagna. I also use the first cut piece as a template for cutting the rest of my sheets. Then you don't have to eyeball everything. Now stack the pasta sheets up and cover them with a damp towel to help with preservation. I'll cook them off in a little bit, but right now it's time to make a bechamel sauce. Okay, the first step here is to make a roux, so add 57 grams of butter to a sauce pot over medium heat. When it's totally melted, add 57 grams of all-purpose flour. Now, stir those two ingredients together until they're evenly combined. Make sure you get into the corners of that pot, since this is where the sauce can stick first. Maybe a whisk wasn't the best utensil for this step. Anyway, let that roux cook for about a minute or so, and once you catch that wonderful, nutty smell of toasted flour, pour in 1 quart of whole milk. Make sure you continue whisking while doing this, all right? No lumps. Next, add a quarter of a small yellow onion studded with a few whole cloves, along with a few sprigs of fresh thyme. Follow that up with a generous dose of freshly grated nutmeg, and you'll have the makings of a tasty mother sauce. Now continue cooking the bechamel over medium to medium-high heat while stirring or whisking pretty consistently. If you don't, well, that sauce will burn to the bottom of the pot and you'll have to start all over again. That would really suck. Trust me, I've done it. Okay, after about 10 minutes, the bechamel will thicken up, and once it's viscous enough to coat the back of a spoon, you're in business. Grab a pepper mill if you have one and season the sauce to taste with some freshly cracked black pepper and fine sea salt. You can certainly opt for white pepper here, but I'm just not a fan of it. Now, give the bechamel one final stir, slap a lid on the pot, and let it rest until it's lasagna building time. On to cooking the pasta. So season a large pot of boiling water with about 1.5 tablespoons of fine sea salt. Grab your fresh spinach pasta and drop 2 or 3 sheets in at a time. After about a minute or so of cooking, carefully transfer each sheet to a large bowl of ice water. This step will stop the cooking process, which will keep the pasta from getting mushy. No mushy pasta. Understood? Cool. Now drain the sheets, then place them on kitchen towels to dry. I like stacking and alternating layers of pasta and towels. The system is nice and compact, so it doesn't take up too much room, and it keeps the pasta mostly separate so they don't stick to each other. All right, it's finally time to build this badass lasagna. Grab all your components, the bolognese sauce, the bechamel, some parm, and of course the pasta. You'll also need a baking dish. I'm using one that's 8 by 8, and I get 2 lasagna out of this recipe. Now, spoon a little bit of that bolognese on the bottom of the dish and spread it out from edge to edge. This will keep the first piece of pasta from drying out and adhering to the pan. Next, add a pasta sheet or more than one if you need to. The goal is an even layer from edge to edge. If you use multiple sheets, then just trim them as needed and make sure to overlap each piece slightly. Then just alternate the direction of the seams on every pasta layer. Now add another thin layer of bolognese sauce on top of the pasta, again spreading it out from edge to edge evenly. Don't overdo it here or the lasagna is not going to hold its shape when you cut and serve it. Grab the bechamel, give it a quick stir, then drizzle some of it on top of the bolognese sauce. It'll spread out as the lasagna bakes, so you can be kind of fast and loose with the application. Again, apply only enough to equal a nice thin layer. Follow the bechamel up with 3 or 4 fat pinches of grated Parmigiano cheese. This is going to add a nice salty punch in between each layer of pasta. And in my opinion, you can't make a great lasagna without the addition of some sort of hard cheese. Okay, repeat the process of layering the ingredients, finishing with a 7th layer of pasta. Now the lasagna is not quite done. Grab that bechamel and spoon a generous amount on top of the last layer of pasta. Spread it nice and even from edge to edge and corner to corner. There, that looks perfect. Give the lasagna a final dusting of Parmigiano cheese. Another 3 or 4 fat pinches is just about right. Then dot the lasagna with a few knobs of butter. This is it, guys. Construction is complete. Now it's time for some heat. Place the lasagna in a preheated 375-degree oven and bake it for approximately 40 to 45 minutes. When done, it should look something like this. Damn, now that is a thing of beauty. It's best practice to let the lasagna rest for 20 to 30 minutes before cutting into it. When you do, it should maintain its shape pretty darn well. Now, I've spent all day slaving over this dish, so I'm jonesing for a taste. It's time to dig in.